Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I've found is that there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data, but there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for DEI stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these inclusive actions and policies within your own organization to help you build a more inclusive world. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Sheri Crosby Wheeler, who is VP of Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Fossil Group. This week, our conversation is about universities nixing legacy admissions, Indeed supporting employees affected by anti trans legislation, and more. Let's get started. Sheri, will you please introduce yourself?
Yes, and thank you, Bernadette. Thank you for the brief intro, and thank you for having me on your show. I think it's a great idea to balance kind of what you hear as so many negative things with some good things, because then people won't, just fall into despair because they know there's always hope. As long as we're here, as long as we're moving forward. So again, my name is Sheri Crosby Wheeler, and I was most recently at Fossil Group, Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And there I was tasked with strengthening the DEI strategy of Fossil Group and really getting it going and rolling. Before that, so I've been practicing DEI for the last 8 years or so. And before that, I was an employment lawyer. Which is still in my near and dear to my heart. I really enjoy employment law. And I practiced employment law for over a decade. I'm still licensed as an attorney. So I still keep up with everything that's going on, including some of the most recent changes in the law here in the United States. But that is my career in a nutshell.
Wow, I did not know that about you, Shri, that you were an employment attorney. Well, we'll have to spend a little bit of extra time on that one thing later today,
Yeah.
coming up about legacy admissions and affirmative action. Wow. So tell me a little bit about all of the work that you've done, especially in your most recent position. What type of experiences are giving you hope? What's giving you the ability to sort of look for the bright side when things are seem to be backsliding?
I think one of the things that really gives me hope and frankly keeps me doing this work, because a lot you could just like get on the off ramp if you would like, but what keeps me doing the work is there are a lot of organizations, despite what you hear, and a lot of people that are still very committed to what diversity, equity, and inclusion means, what it is, what it can be, how it can enrich our lives. And you hear that each and every day, just speaking to employees, speaking to organizations. So that's what really keeps me committed and staying in the work, because there's a lot of people that are, despite anything that you might hear, there are, I mean, I can't even emphasize that enough, how much there are people who care about fairness, care about equality, care about equity, care about justice, care about everyone being able to be their best and do their best in the world.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I think the crib notes there is don't read the headlines.
Right? Like glance at those, know that that's out there, but keep pressing forward. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because I know in my work I talk to so many really well-meaning people who sure they need some direction, of course, right? I think we
Mhm.
all have plenty to learn, but I really appreciate that there is movement, that there is intention. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
You know,
And can I
yeah.
say one more quick little thing? There was a practitioner in Tarn. I cannot remember her name, but I saw her and she highlighted this quote, and I keep thinking about it. And it says that a DEI practitioner's work, our work is not measured in quarters. When you think about a company, our work is measured in generations. So we may not even see the end result of what our work has done and what the seeds that we have sown, but they're there. So I just always remember that it's measured in generations, not just quarters.
I appreciate that. That's a good reminder for all of us. Mic drop moment right there. Okay. Well, part of what I wrote about last week was how I was presenting findings of a DEI analysis to a client. And one of the things that I like to emphasize, and we as a firm really focus on, is the company's values. And in this case, this was an organization whose one of their guiding principles that's been around for years is we value diversity and we actively seek people with different perspectives and experiences. Now, this is a company without a DEI committee, without DEI pillars, without ERGs, without anything. And they have that statement, right, as part of their guiding principles. And I think that a lot of companies have something that still has to do with people in their principles or in their values. And I think that it's just so important to emphasize that. I mean, you've been on the inside. Tell me a little bit about your experience tying DEI to values.
Yeah, so I think a lot of times when you're trying to get everybody on the same page about what it is that you're doing, tying it to the values, that's crucially important. And like you said, there are a lot of companies that have pieces of D&I embedded in their values already, even if they're not doing anything. If they think they're not doing anything, it's already there. So that foundation is already there. It's already laid. So for instance, at Fossil Group and at my previous employers, whenever I would put together I called it a DEI 101. Again, trying to get everybody on the same page about what definitions are we working with and what does DEI mean at this organization. I always included values in there so that people could make that connection with D&I. Here's our values. Here's what D&I means. Hey, look at how those two meet. Look where they intersect. And sometimes that's an aha for people. For some people, like, oh, okay. Yeah, that is something important to us. And then I'll always too, sometimes you'll have individuals that may say, well, no, or try to pull back a little bit. And I'm like, well, hey, here's our values. Remember, this is what our values say, that what we're about and what we want to do. And so that anchoring it to the values is so important.
Yes, and it's great for the resistors.
Mm-hmm.
It's already there. Yes.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move into this week's 5 things. Now, the first story is about the new Barbie movie, which I have yet to see.
I saw it.
Yeah. What do you think?
We were like, well, what is going on? There was a lot happening in that movie, but also some good messages.
Well, let's talk about the representation, because Barbie's and Mattel's been a really fantastic company in terms of representation amongst the dolls over the years. So let's talk about a little bit about the representation in the movie. Fill me in.
Yeah, so I think they did a really great job of showing how Barbie has evolved over the years. I know that's not how Barbie started, but in the movie, you could just see all these different types of people, different abilities, different backgrounds, different things. They were all Barbies. It's so funny because hi Barbie, hi Barbie, hi Barbie. They kept saying hi Barbie to each other, but they were all different types of Barbies and Kens as well. And I think, and then in the movie, also the main character, America Ferrera, she was in there. And that was probably intentional with the filmmakers to have, again, more representation and the main Barbie, she was called stereotypical Barbie. I thought that was so interesting. But then watching the movie, I was just like, there's a lot going on. There was singing, there was dancing, there were some things that were just fantastical. But I'm glad that it's doing well. I wondered if it would, but the theater was full, and it wasn't just women. Although I read a stat that said it was mainly women who went, like 60% or something. But it wasn't just women; there were men there as well. So, and I was sitting beside a gentleman, and he was just laughing, and some of the little inside jokes and little points that were made, he just laughed and laughed. I said, "Okay, he's getting it."
That's great.
Yeah.
I appreciate that it's sort of taking, it's sort of spoofing not just the product and its origination, but also showing its evolution through time, and also having this sort of feminist agenda. I think I can't wait to see it.
Yes, it's you should see it. It's worth going to see. And I think they, have broken records, them and Oppenheimer together, just two movies coming out at the same time. Usually one beats the other one really bad. And they said, no, not this time. They both did. And I was like, wow, they both did well. So
We don't often get movie reviews here on Five Things, so thank you so much, Sheri. Okay,
yeah.
this the second story this week comes from a bunch of companies like Fannie Mae and Cisco, which are now offering grandparent leave as an employee benefit to keep their older employees around. So that's paid time off upon the birth of an or adoption of a grandchild. What do you think about this?
I think that's outstanding. I think that's amazing that those organizations are recognizing that people are in different phases of their lives. And, age being one of the dimensions of diversity, and whether or not you have children or grandchildren or adopted, and other dimensions of diversity. So those companies, whoever is in working on diversity, equity, and inclusion there, kudos to them, because I think that's amazing. And I think to hear something like that come out, and again, that evolution of D&I, there are people who would never connect that to diversity and equity and inclusion. They wouldn't even think that that's what it was, because they have one set. And so you have to have things like that. You have to have benefits like that and stories like that for people to say, oh, that falls under that umbrella. Yes, it does. And there are people, practitioners, who are sitting at these companies, at least the companies that don't have them, who are trying to think of things of this nature that will attract that workforce, that will keep that workforce. I'm not a grandparent yet, but I'm like, wow, that sounds great. That I would have leave that's specific to being able to, be a grandparent and moving into that stage of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it's really important to remember and remind us all that diversity means everyone. And if
Mm-hmm.
we leave people out, then we're going to pay for it later. We have to
Mm-hmm.
involve everyone in this conversation. So absolutely, these are benefits that can really support all different types of other intersecting identities as well.
Right.
Okay, third story comes from Wesleyan, MIT, Amherst, at Carnegie Mellon, and other colleges which have eliminated legacy admissions following the Supreme Court's decision to strike down affirmative action. So, legacy admissions is the practice of giving preferential admission status to the children of alumni, and it
Mm,
perpetuates inequality and lack of diversity.
yeah. Yeah, that I've been reading about that as well. And I think the initial reaction of a lot of people is like, yeah, do away with legacy admissions as well. And so I'm like, okay, that is one reaction. Then I've heard a couple of people who said, well, then also for the individuals who may not have gone to those colleges and underrepresented populations, if they go, and then now their children will not have the benefit of legacy admissions. So it's like, okay, you you got to think through it. And I don't know what the answer is. I'm glad I'm not sitting in having to make that decision. I don't know what the answer is, but it's something to, I guess, something to try. And I think what's giving me hope and kind of buoying me is, even though affirmative action for the most part in a lot of places is done with, then you can look at other things to, again, try to diversify those student bodies. So it's going to cause people to say, okay, what else can we look at to make sure that our student body, what other items and things, indicators can we look at to make sure that our student body is diverse? Did a student have to work during high school? That might speak to socioeconomic status, or might speak to something that they've overcome. And in addition to going to school. And so then, do we allow these students in because we know that they're hard workers, or they can overcome things? So I'm still kind of just hopeful about the whole situation.
I am too. We'll see what happens. There have been a few other colleges that have announced free tuition, like Duke and
Mm,
Princeton, for students with lower incomes or with parents with lower incomes. So
mhm.
hopefully we'll start to see more of that. But
Yeah.
whatever creative ideas colleges and universities come up with to
Hmm.
exceed even the current levels
Right.
of diversity. Of course, we'll talk about it here on Five Things. So
Yeah.
stay tuned. All right, the fourth story this week comes from Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. A Greek life
Mm.
first here in Five Things, which made history by incorporating its own credit union for members only. It's the first Black owned, women owned, sorority based digital banking institution in the US,
Mhm.
empowering members to control their finances and build economic wealth.
Yes, I saw that story too. You're on top of all the stories, and that really made me smile. So I am a member of a different sorority, but it doesn't matter because we're all a part of Divine Nine. That's what it's called, which is historically African American sororities and fraternities that have a long legacy and history. So to see that Alpha Kappa Alpha did that, I was just like, absolutely, kudos to them. I think that's wonderful. I think that, speaks to impacting the community and building economic and generational wealth. And so, hopefully there are a bunch of fast followers that are coming behind, including my sorority. And so I thought that was just a wonderful story, and kudos to Alpha Kappa Alpha.
I appreciate that they're sort of taking matters into their own hands, right?
Hmm.
Instead of
Hmm.
waiting for the big banks, they have to figure out, and instead of waiting for equity.
Right. Right, absolutely. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't say what my sorority was, Delta Sigma Theta, Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Which this week, by the way, we had our national convention, and Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown, she was admitted to our sorority, so we're super excited about that.
Wow, that is very
We're like,
exciting.
yay!
Yes, celebrating here on Five Things. Okay, cool.
Yes.
All right, the last story this week comes from the company Indeed, which has a new benefit to support U.S. employees affected by legislation limiting access to gender affirming services or threatening action for
Mhm.
supporting gender non-conforming, trans, and non-binary children. So these impacted employees will be allowed to relocate to a safer location without restrictions, with a $10,000 relocation expense
Wow.
budget and salary adjustments based on the new location. So, with
Yeah.
anti-LGBTQ, anti-trans legislation,
Mhm.
Indeed is saying, "Hey, we want to keep you safe."
Yeah, I saw that one as well, and I think again, you found really good stuff. I mean, I think kudos to Indeed for recognizing that again, and that speaks to DEI practitioners. I think the lady who is at Indeed, I don't want to say the wrong name, so I won't say, but whoever is the practitioner running DEI there, I'm sure they had something to do with this. And I think it's wonderful to support employees in this way, to do what a company can when legislation has gone in a way that's against the values of the organization. So the company's saying, well, here's what we can do. And we're going to continue to support employees in the way that we can. So it's just critically important for practitioners, DEI practitioners, to continue to be mindful, to listen to podcasts like yours, to know what's going on so that you can stay on top of things, learn new things about, okay, here's what we can do. Okay, we can't do that, but we can do this. So it's critically important to just stay on top of those things. And I say, again, kudos to Indeed. That is amazing. I hope that, employees are able to take advantage of it, because to move, we all know that's a big deal. That's a big deal to just uproot your family and go. But for the employees that need it, and that would like to take advantage of the benefit, I hope that they are able to do so.
Yes, me as well. I mean, here in Illinois, we are getting people from all over the region. So Kentucky,
Mm,
uh, Missouri, Tennessee, and I think there's another one. And they're all coming here for affirming
mm,
care. They're coming here for reproductive coverage
yeah.
and care. And so it's
Not so much in my state.
yeah,
I live
right.
in Texas, not so much. And so, I could understand if there are individuals that are leaving Texas, going other places because it's, that's not the case. The legislature has chosen differently.
Yeah.
And so people have to do what they have to do.
Yes. So thank goodness for companies like Indeed, which are filling
Mhm.
in those gaps to take care of their people. All right,
Absolutely.
Sheri, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest. How can folks keep in touch with you or get in touch with you?
Well, on my favorite social media platform, LinkedIn, this for nerds. That's where I'm on there every day. I respond to connection requests. I respond to messages especially people who want to talk about DE and I. So that's where people can mainly find me. That's where I hang out.
Awesome. Well, if you are on LinkedIn, then I'm sure you follow Mita Malik. So that's this week's call to action. Follow Mita Malik on LinkedIn and check out her Brown Table Talk podcast for awesome career and workplace advice. Thank you so much for being a wonderful guest today, Sheri. If you don't mind, let's re-record the intro so that I can get a clean recording because I mispronounced your name.
Okay, we can.
Okay.
All right, and is it still going? I want to say thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to spend a little time with you talking 5 good things about D&I.
Yes, my pleasure. My pleasure. And if you don't already get the 5 Things newsletter, you can subscribe at 5thingsdei.com. All right, let's just re-record this a little bit here.
Okay.
In this week's episode, I'm joined by Sheri Crosby Wheeler. Let's try this again. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Sheri Crosby Wheeler, former VP of Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Fossil. This week, our conversation is about universities nixing legacy admissions, Indeed supporting employees affected by anti-LGBTQ legislation, and more. Okay, I think that's better. Okay, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Sheri.
Thank
And
you, Bernadette. It was
yeah,
nice to meet you, and thank you again.